Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. I'm calling the Thursday, May 15th, 2025 meeting of the Finance Administration Committee to order. And introductions. My name is Jim Spear. I'm the chair of this committee. Michael Gardini is a member of this committee. Mike Selmanson is the vice chair, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And Maggie Dobbs is our borough manager, and Emily Pisano is our assistant borough manager. And moving on to approval of minutes for April 17th.
So moved. Second.
Everyone have a chance to review it? All shipshape? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? The minutes are approved. Treasurer's report.
So I don't have much to point out this month, but I'm happy to entertain any questions if anyone had anything that jumped out at them. Everything's looking good. We're all tucking away. I will make one note is that we did recently open an escrow account, which we didn't have previously. So that will be when we get land development plans, anything professional services will go into a dedicated escrow account. It is a non-interest bearing account, out of which all of our invoices for professional services will be paid. So we will no longer be accepting letters of credit as financial security for land development, so it'll all be cash escrows.
Cash
That
on the
will
barrel.
ensure that we get paid up front as opposed to paying out first and then getting reimbursed after the fact. We are also opening up 2 new Pliget accounts. These are essentially reopening the Pliget accounts that were closed a couple of years ago. One is going to be for general funds, one is for capital funds. So essentially what we're going to do is figure out what our what our minimum balance wants to be in our checking account, and then move everything else into the Pliget account, which is a higher interest yielding account. So we're looking at about a 4.51% interest rate
Oh, wow.
on these Pliget accounts. So it's great since we just got, all of our income mostly from all of our taxes. We have some extra cash sitting around that doesn't need to be expended until later in the year. So we'll lock that in the interest account and earn a little bit of extra cash to reinvest into our budget.
The escrow accounts, do those earn interest or are those non?
They're non-interest bearing
Okay,
accounts.
that's the way the legal escrows work.
Correct.
Alright.
Guys, it's great.
Yeah, I didn't see anything on here that
Me neither.
can I invest into.
Good, all right. We're good to move on? We have no presentation items. Action items. We have a motion for approving the scheduled bills for the general sewer, solid waste, capital, highway aid, and green funds totaling $212,913.98.
So moved. Second.
Excellent, all right. Discussion on this?
Anything worth pointing out?
Anybody? Checks? Any special checks anybody wants to highlight? That's a no.
Yeah.
All right, so all in favor approving bills? Okay, great. We've voted to recommend approval of bills. And motion, do we need a motion for this, for employee handbook? Or are we just?
I don't think we should move just yet. How do we have it?
We need a motion and a second and then discussion.
Okay, can I have a motion to discuss the update to employee handbook?
So moved. Second.
Right.
Okay. So I've added my comments onto the comments that were in before. And before we present this to council as a whole, there are 5 very specific things that we should decide that are still missing in here that we would have to decide to recommend if we were going to recommend for adoption later tonight. The first is in section 2.3. And this relates to if somebody has a complaint of discrimination, typically they would take it to the borough manager to lodge the complaint of discrimination. But if they want to complain about Maggie, obviously they can't do that. Not that they ever would Maggie, but if the complaint somehow involved Maggie or that Maggie didn't pay attention to an earlier complaint, you have to have an alternative reporter. And so I didn't know who that should be. My sense is that it should probably come then out of, I don't think it should go to Emily because she's your subordinate if the complaint's about you, right? So I think it should probably come to Fred, not by name, but Borough Council President. So if that makes sense, I didn't put that in there, but if that's what we think,
That
I
makes
mean, that would
sense
be
to
my recommendation.
For sure.
That makes sense.
Okay, so that's the first one. Second one, 2.4, we're taking out, there was a specific provision in there about you had to be fully vaxxed for COVID, which was part of our provisions. Alan took it out altogether. I suggested that we put it, I thought it was in 2.4. Yes, so I suggested that we at least give ourselves some flexibility there to say, if and when we have a future, if we have another pandemic of some kind. So I suggested this language, the borough reserves the right to require appropriate vaccinations based on future endemic or pandemic conditions or when it deems such vaccines are otherwise advisable or necessary as a matter of public health and safety. So that it's built into the policy so we don't have to amend the handbook if that ever comes to pass.
So like you have forewarning that might.
That we could do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Especially, my thought is especially if we're in a pandemic or endemic setting, we would want public health and safety to move really fast to adopt it and council to adopt it. We don't want to have to layer in an extra layer of, and we have to amend the handbook too to require it.
Right. So,
Yeah.
as long as that's legally acceptable.
Yeah,
Think so?
yeah,
Okay.
right.
Um,
Okay, so I want to keep that language that was in 2.4.
so wait a minute, so it's, reads here as the whole thing is.
Is
crossed
taken out, so we would just have something here that captions a vaccination policy, right? Just make vaccination policy. Because it was part of the post-child offer medical exam, which it probably didn't really belong there anyway.
Okay.
So we would just add that in there.
We want to come up with specific language later, you're saying?
No, I have. The borough reserves the right to require
Oh, okay.
appropriate
I'm sorry,
vaccinations
I'm not looking at
based
that.
on future endemic or pandemic conditions or when it deems such vaccines are otherwise advisable or necessary as a matter of public health and safety.
Okay,
So it's in the comment, I have that language.
all right.
So,
That's acceptable to the office, Maggie, that kind of thing?
That would be fine.
Okay.
okay. Mike, you're good with that?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is 3.4 bereavement leave. We have bereavement leave, Alan asked the question of whether we want to include grandparent or not. Most employers that I know include grandparent as part of bereavement leave. In immediate family, because especially in some families, the grandparent actually has acted as the parent, So, we do have this language about or somebody acting as such, but it's just cleaner to just include grandparent. I don't know why. And I just think it's nicer, quite frankly. Like if my kid's grandparents died, I would hope that they would have enough bereavement leave. The bigger question is, the way it's written is we give days off. It does not specifically say whether they're consecutive. They have to be taken consecutively or not. And I suggested that they can be taken non-consecutively because, you might have to, be working on the bank account and moving the surviving spouse into a thing, and then the funeral is 4 days later. And so, depending on circumstances, there's no particular reason why it should have to be consecutive. You might want to save one of those days to take care of death-related things.
Right.
Right, so,
Yeah, okay.
so we can say, it can be taken non-consecutively, right?
I had just commented that if we do that we put a cap on when those days can be used, so they
Right.
couldn't be used months apart.
Right.
But
Right.
you could have 3
Within-
days, so I suggested within a 4 to 6 week time frame, or 1 to 2 pay periods or something to that effect.
6 weeks is what, 42 days? Yeah. Yeah, 30 days seems too short, but 60 days seems long. So what did you say for spot?
4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, let's say within 6 weeks. Does that make sense? No, within 6 weeks
So
of data.
how would that create like an entitlement for that employee, like to name the days, or would it be by arrangement with a supervisor, to come up with what days are? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you phrase it this way, is it,
I mean, if you're doing it, typically if you have bereavement leave, you're not typically giving notice until date of death anyway, right? So,
Right.
So,
but if you're, the scenario you're talking about, like if they have to be somewhere to move
Right,
someone in,
right.
to a different facility or
Yeah.
something, that might not be known right away.
yeah, as much notice as, the typical language you say is the employee should provide as much notice as practicable.
Okay, I'm wondering if there would be a conflict, like if an employee demanded certain exact days within a 6-week period and didn't have any flexibility over that. Have we given the employee the right to demand those particular days, or, just the right to request and schedule them with a supervisor?
How often, Maggie, does somebody have to be, like how hard is it for them? How often is it that somebody literally has to be in the office that day? Like is that an issue, or are we?
Typically, no.
Yeah.
It's more just a matter of maintaining staffing, since there's so few of us in the office. We like to maintain a minimum of 2 people in the office at any given time, just for safety and security and coverage reasons.
Yeah,
Obviously, once we have the vestibule, we're a little bit more protected.
yeah,
But the issue now is that with a single person in the office, anybody can just walk in and they're a single person in the
Yeah,
office.
yeah.
So it's more from a staffing perspective.
Okay.
So it's more of a concern if we have, say, 2 people have already requested off
Yeah.
for already like a pre-scheduled PTO that already received authorization, and then we have an unexpected absence due to a death. Obviously, that would happen if there was an illness too, and
Yeah.
we just kind of work through it. So it's not an ideal situation, but we would manage it as best we could, just to ensure that the office stays open.
So I think we can say, days must be taken within 6 weeks of the date of death. And the employee should give as much practical notice as possible and subject to adequate staff.
And I think, again, being a small staff,
Yeah.
if somebody had requested PTO that maybe could be flexible and
Right.
could come in instead, that would just be
Yeah.
a conversation that we would have. So I'm not too worried about it. We kind of make this up as we go anyway,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
because we're only managing, administratively, we're managing 4 people, and then Public Works has their own schedule, and obviously police have their own schedule. The police have the backup support of Lower Marion, right? So if they need to be out, we have coverage there.
Yeah.
And then again, Public Works and admin staff will just kind of shift duties based on what coverage we have. So in the event that we do have multiple absences and we need to scale back on work, or just not do something that day and push it off until a later date, and that's just what we're gonna have to do.
How many total public works plus admin do we have?
Total Public Works is 5, admin 4, so 9 total.
Gotcha.
And then there's 6, that includes the chief of police for the police side.
Okay.
And
But you're,
then
you
our
I was
house
just like,
man.
when you were talking about like if you need to pull over to Public Works, but you wouldn't do that with police, right? You wouldn't pull them into the, or would you?
No, police wouldn't come into the office, and Public Works generally won't come into the office because they're out and about doing things.
Right.
So it's, so we generally stay kind of
Yeah.
in our areas.
So I think the way we should do
But
it
we do
is
have housemen, sorry, so, yeah.
limit it to 2 of the days. Of your bereavement days, you can take 2 non-consecutively to take care of things, subject to as much advance notice as practicable and subject to adequate staff. So you want to use those 2 days, you gotta give us notice and it's gotta be approved. The other days, your mother drops dead, you're not gonna give us advance notice of staff, of whatever,
Hopefully not.
and probably not subject to adequate staff. Okay, so that's that one. 4.4 is our drug test, post-accident drug testing. I was surprised that it doesn't specifically say that if you get a confirmed positive drug test, that shall result in immediate termination. It doesn't say what the consequence is anywhere. It talks about workplace safety and accident in the workplace of, employees must be readily available for testing even if they leave the site to obtain medical care, leave the site to obtain assistance as a result of the accident. But it doesn't say the next step. Like, okay, we've tested them, now what? Right? Don't we want to say if you get a confirmed positive test result, it shall result in termination?
Well, are there, situations where that, I don't know, but like false positive situations?
So that's why,
contested
that's,
results,
so confirmed positive.
confirmed positive.
So the way drug testing works is you have an initial drug test. If it comes back positive, the employee then has the right to what they call split sample testing. So they actually take a sample, they put one aside, they test the first one. If it comes back positive, that way if they claim it's contaminated or it somehow gets contaminated, you have the separate sample. They also have the right, it gets reviewed by a medical review officer. So if you're taking a prescription medication, that can create either a false, well, it's not technically a false positive, but it's an excused positive.
Yep.
That also gets screened out and is reported as a negative.
Okay.
So confirmed positive actually is a term of art within the drug testing
All right.
world, meaning it's deemed, it doesn't include any positives that are deemed negative.
Got it. But so we actually want to say that that person will be terminated? Like it seems kind of, we could say, that can be grounds for termination or something like that, but.
Well, remember that this is in the context, and this is within somebody's driving a borough vehicle and is in an accident.
Right.
So you're driving under the influence, if you're driving a borough vehicle under the accident,
Yeah.
under the influence,
Doesn't look good, I admit.
we're not talking about confirmed positives in the normal course, right? I mean, we don't even do drug testing under this. We only do post-accident. Yeah. So.
I mean, it seems right.
You wanna say may?
It seems like that person should be terminated, but do we actually want to say that they will be terminated in the manual?
Lots of companies have zero tolerance for post-accident testing is all I'll say. But that's why I bring it to you guys, right? I didn't write it in there because that's a policy choice, right? It can be may. If you think it's too harsh,
I'd say,
What do you
I said
have?
maybe covers it,
Yeah.
I mean.
What's the manager?
I mean, you hear about false positives. So, I mean, what are we testing for? And are there any substances that would be legal to take that would result in a confirmed positive?
right? So if they have a prescription for it and they report that to the medical review officer, that will not be reported to us as a confirmed positive. It will be reported to us as a. So we don't know. So let's say I'm taking, I don't know, what could what's an upper? I don't even, I should know.
No.
Something
Sorry.
that, there's various, like there's various prescriptions that will test positive because they're closely related to other meds.
Right.
But the person reports, I have a prescription for this. And if they report that to the medical review officer, the medical review officer will report it to us as a negative. It won't be considered a confirmed positive. So that's why I was saying to Jim, it's a term of art
Yeah.
that confirmed positive means basically positive without an excuse or without a prescription.
Okay.
It's just whether we want to say that person shall be terminated or may be
Yeah,
terminated.
will be subject to discipline up into termination. I mean, I'm fine with that.
That seems like it covers it,
Yeah.
to say that they, this
Yeah.
is grounds for termination.
Will be subject.
I think that would be fine. If this is being added in, this would be something that I would want to just confirm with our solicitor and our insurance carrier. Because this might be something then, just in terms of a claims, if we're terminating an employee, this would involve our insurance carrier. So they may have some recommendations for language as well.
Yeah.
So we can double check with them if they would
Yeah.
prefer covered.
Yeah, if they want to say up to and including termination. I mean, a lot of insurance companies will tell you they'd rather have the zero tolerance policy, right? Again, because especially if they're insuring our vehicles, right? One of our guys is drunk or high and hits somebody and kills them. From the insurance company's perspective, they want the policy to be as strict as possible because they want to minimize the risk of any of our folks driving under the influence. Right? So generally, they're going to want the strictest policy
Right.
that says shall.
Okay.
So that's why a lot of my clients just say shall. Okay. Let's see. Oh, there was a reference, Maggie, I didn't know what this meant. In 4.12, I have the feeling that Alan copied this from somewhere. He has the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and equivalent state agencies will accept and investigate charges of unlawful discrimination or harassment at no charge to the complaining party. The nearest office of the EEOC and equivalent state and local agencies can be found in your local directory.
Yeah, so Alan didn't modify this section, so
Yeah.
this is all pre-existing.
Okay.
So I'm not sure where this originated.
I don't know what they mean by in your local directory, but we have posters. Do we have like the EEO posters up?
They're in the break room.
Maybe we just take that sentence out. So I don't know what they mean by in your, I mean, are they literally saying like your phone book? Phone book? Yeah, I mean, I think that's where that language came from or something, right? I mean, we don't have a borough directory with this information in it, right?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, so I think we just, I'm just gonna say, why don't we just say can be found online? Because you can't find them online. Okay. And last but not least was the smoking policy, which Alan took out and said it wasn't enforceable. This was another one for John because some states don't allow you to he has, as of January 2023, the borough will not hire any individual who uses any form of nicotine product, with the exception of nicotine patches. Obviously, I assume that that's there because some prior council adopted that.
Yeah, again, I don't know.
So I don't know why Alan then said this is unenforceable. Because as far as I know in Pennsylvania, there are some states where you can't enforce that, but I don't believe Pennsylvania is one of them. So the question is, do we want to have a tobacco policy or a non-nicotine policy for our employees. The reason to put it in, the reason why companies put it in is it helps greatly reduce their health insurance costs. You know, if you have a non-smoker population. So that's probably why it was there. But I figured none of us were on council at the time, so I wondered if the prior council adopted that. I mean, it's only January 1st, 2023. It's 2 years ago, so
Yeah.
it's just there. So I don't know why Alan then said, oh, you can't enforce this.
I don't know.
Okay, so that's a walkout question. And then everything else is, you know, either Alan's edits or my edits. I think they're all self-explanatory. Most of it's just kind of cleaning up some language.
Okay, so what do we do with this? Is this close enough to being able to be passed, or do we need to go back and
I mean, I think
Check
what we
and
can
see.
do is say that we want to recommend it to council with these specific edits for their consideration. I mean, has all of council seen this before this week? I would suspect that full council might have lots more questions.
I think it's been in the packet before, not with the edits.
Not with the edits, that's the thing. So I don't know whether, I mean, I guess it depends whether the rest of council is prepared to adopt it tonight.
I mean, I think
We can
if
say
we're,
we can
if we're
recommend
good
it
with
with our
our thing,
edit,
we can
with these
recommend it.
additional edits, right?
Yeah, if there's any questions,
Yeah.
then folks can bring them
And I
up.
think-
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then I think the other thing we can do is say, we adopt it subject to final review by Walco and final revisions as I'll do the explanation tonight.
Okay.
And say, there were 5 things that we recommended in addition to the edits that were in there.
All right.
Okay,
So,
because they have to approve those too.
yeah.
Each of
Okay.
those. Okay. So,
So,
do you want to?
would a
I think
vote?
we've done the motion. Oh, I guess this
So we have to
motion, amend the
vote
motion
on
with
the motion to recommend to council that they approve the employee policy
With the
manual
with the
with
changes,
these 5 additional,
where it's 4 changes and 1
1, 2.
question
Yeah.
about smoking.
yep,
Yeah, I'll
Actually, it's
amend
4
my motion
changes.
to reflect
Yeah.
what, as you outlined.
okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All in favor of that? Okay, great. Moving on. May I have a motion for the adoption of the Narberth Board Commission and Committee Appointment Policy?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, so this is in the packet. This is the first time we're seeing in an open meeting, this board, the manager suggested. And I think for pretty much the most part, it gets at the wish list we circulated earlier, kind of, did anybody, so it's a really different way though of discussing potential appointments, which is essentially to sort them out in an executive session before we move on to an agenda. But it would work.
and it's because they're not employees, we've talked to John and it's okay to do it in executive session, did I understand that? Like we double checked with him, because I always thought that it was limited to executive session, that exception was limited to employees. Well, they're not.
Let's go on the assumption that it's fine, since seems to be.
The reason why I asked was because, when I was put up to fill the vacancy,
Yeah.
I assumed, and they interviewed the 3 of us, I assumed that was going to be in an executive session and was really surprised that it wasn't, that it was done in the public setting. And I assumed that was because it wasn't covered by the executive session rules. And that made me wonder why.
So interviews are different though. So this policy also proposes that interviews be done by us here in this committee. Is that right? Yeah.
But in executive session, no.
No, I think that
So
it
what-
was like
so
this,
it's-
just council.
It's just
If
deliberating.
Oh, okay.
So
I missed that.
You can have a meeting, so we can hold interviews with the three of you,
Right,
or some other group
Right.
of three to serve as an ad hoc
Right.
committee if you want a
Right.
different mix of people.
Right.
But we can hold interviews. It's not a public meeting, it's an interview just between that candidate and this group, and this group does not constitute a quorum, being that you're 3 of 7.
Yeah.
So that is how we can hold interviews,
gotcha.
in person, virtual, during the day, evening.
So it's not even executive session, it's just an
It's not
informal
an
get
exec-
together.
It's an informal get
Gotcha,
together.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it makes sense to me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the only other comment that our solicitor had made about this, that I just want to bring to your attention for discussion purposes, is he just asked if we want to interview everyone who applies. So as it's written, it's everyone gets an interview, but he suggested if there's a person who applied that everyone kind of agrees would be good for the role, do you really need to interview other people
Right.
and essentially give them false hope that they're going to be appointed because you all have your preferred candidate without having to go through the interview process. So the interview process is really more beneficial
Yeah.
when perhaps you don't have a clear kind of front runner or want to kind of see everyone apples to apples.
So interviews can be at our discretion or as needed or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
I kind of like the idea of interviewing
Then we do it.
everybody.
Then-
Just because, I mean, it's not like we get overwhelmed with candidates, right? And it's
Yeah.
also a way to be like, hey, we really liked your resume.
I think if we have the choice
But-
to interview them, then
Yeah.
we interview them, but.
You know, like, we really like your resume, but, you know, we have the perfect candidate here. You know, like, I ended up on civil service as an alternate because Jen and I both applied,
Right,
and, you know, Jen, you know, had applied for other things, and they had said, we don't think you're as qualified for that, but we're gonna put you on civil
so
service.
as long as we want to interview them, we will, but if we don't
Right.
feel the need to, we don't have to.
so
Yeah, that's what John was saying.
yeah, so I think John was suggesting that the language be amended to more or less put some small caveat to say, you know, shall schedule interviews upon request or at the determination of the committee or something to that effect, as opposed to lumping everybody into the interview category.
That's
Then it would
great.
just be,
Yeah,
you know, interviews will be held at the discretion of the selection committee.
that sounds
Yeah,
good.
I think that makes sense.
And there are some commissions where you know, you have to meet the minimum qualifications.
Yeah.
And certainly we don't wanna interview somebody if they don't. Like, if you're not a resident, you can't, in most of these, except for planning commission, a couple others.
As long as we,
You have to be,
yeah,
so they have to meet the minimum qualifications.
so if we have broad discretion to interview or not, we
Yeah.
can filter those people out before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is that we do have a clause in here to say that employees of the borough may not sit on boards or commissions. However, the HARB does
Right.
have
Mm-hmm.
a certain requirement. So for that, we can just caveat it to say unless
Unless otherwise
otherwise required.
Oh, speaking of which, it's Doug Rosenberg. Is he supposed to come tonight?
Yeah,
Should I tell him?
should,
I'm done.
I emailed him.
Okay, I'm actually in finance and administration, but as well as you. So are you coming tonight? Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, see you soon. He's just worried, traffic's heavy,
Okay,
might not be here at 7.
so there are committees where a borough employee may even have to serve on
Yeah.
the committee.
And then we can really get in the weeds if Kevin is actually a borough employee because technically he's a third-party consultant.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And isn't, would that apply to Regina, who's also on the library board?
Yeah,
She's an elected
Yeah.
official.
yeah,
Again, also technically an elected official,
yeah.
not an
Not an
employee.
employee.
She gets paid by the county though, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The only other question I had on this was way down at the bottom, 3C. This is for the vacancies for which there, is a long-standing vacancy
Yeah.
that just has not received any applications or no satisfactory applications. How are those gonna get handled? Since, looks like C has been completely deleted.
But I thought that there was something further up. I guess that was actually just if somebody applies when there isn't a vacancy, right?
When there isn't a vacancy, yeah, that'd be the opposite. If someone
Yes.
applies when there isn't a vacancy. So these are like rolling vacancies.
Right, well, like civil service was the perfect example, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
so, what do you do when you suddenly get an application for a long-standing vacancy? What is the procedure?
I guess it was covered under B1.
B1?
I think so. At least that's the way I read it. It says the application period for vacancies created midterm shall be 1 month from the announcement of the vacancy,
Yeah.
or until a qualified application has been received. So it's not just it
So-
ends at a month. It can,
Does-
if you don't receive
Okay.
one, it can.
So does the receipt of one qualified application trigger two here, like the review process? Is that what we're saying? The receipt of a single qualified application for a long-standing vacancy.
Yeah, so if we have a long-standing vacancy and we receive a qualified application, then that would just progress before the board
Yeah.
that application would be distributed to the
Yeah.
board. You could then choose to have an interview
Right.
or not,
Yeah.
and then we would appoint the person.
Or not.
Or not.
Okay.
Right, that's the thing. is
Yeah.
they don't
So,
automatically-
right, so then the selection committee would then
Mhm.
convene
Yeah,
to make a determination on the application. Could choose to interview or not interview, and then could make a decision on the application in favor of appointing or not in favor of appointing. If the selection committee is not in favor of appointing, even though they are a qualified candidate, there is no obligation that you have to put that person on, even if there's a vacancy, if they're not the person that you want. This is where council this is where council exerts some of its authority in shaping policy by appointing the people that you want on these boards and commissions.
yeah. Okay, that seems good, as long as that's covered. That seems good.
Mike, there was, as long as we're on the alternate members of board and commissions, I think we have to add unless otherwise, some of this language actually doesn't work on the Civil Service Commission, and here's why. And we discovered this mistake after I was the alternate, which is if the alternate is involved in the interview process, they have to be involved at every step. So they can't just come in the middle of the process and be a part of one meeting because somebody is absent for a quorum. They
Okay.
can't actually participate unless they participate from the beginning to
So-
the end. So it's just another one of those where you have to say unless more restricted as a matter of law, like one of
It
those.
does say if that position is provided for within the enabling ordinance.
Right, no, so it is provided for in the enabling ordinance. But the civil service has this very specific rule that
Yeah.
says that you can't, so, we might have 3 meetings, right? We're gonna have a meeting where we decide on what the questions for the oral exam is.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna actually do the oral exam, then we're gonna evaluate the candidates, and then they're gonna vote, right?
Yeah,
The alternate has to, if the alternate wants to participate in that process, they don't get to vote at the end, but
Yeah.
even just saying their point of view or participating in the interview. The civil service rules say they have to be involved from beginning to end. They can't just show up to like one of those steps to make the quorum.
do you feel like this
Does that make
language
sense?
supersedes the enabling ordinance of Civil Service Commission?
Well, it just says may serve as a substitute member for the Board of Commissioners on which they have been appointed and they've been a single member is absent from one or more meetings to ensure a quorum. So they can't just come in for one meeting
Right, they
to
can't
ensure
sub
the
in for a
quorum.
person mid-process.
So I think here's just another example of where we can put a caveat,
Yeah,
because
that's what
there's, Because some of the boards and commissions have ordinances that specifically define things, which is where the enabling ordinance came into play. But I know that, NIDA has their own bylaws, civil service has their own bylaws. So we have some who do supersede, so I can just add in a caveat here to say, unless otherwise stated in.
Yeah, it's actually the last sentence that bothered me. So it's that alternate members are recognized members able to fully participate in discussions and voting activities if serving in a one-off or long-term substitute capacity, but shall otherwise be a non-voting member.
And that
So
was, Jim, you had a specific question about that, so I had included that to kind of provide that clarification.
Yeah, but civil service, they can't be involved in voting activities.
So
Unless
that's
the
fine.
person
So
says
we'll just put the caveat.
Just the caveat.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the time, so I want to.
Yep, okay.
Any other concerns about this?
Nope.
Okay, does this need more work before we send it on to council? or-
Again, these are some minor changes that we can make, so if you feel comfortable with the changes that we recommend, then you can go ahead and recommend approval of it with the modifications that we discussed.
Okay, all in
Makes sense,
favor of approving the modifications that we discussed? Okay, great. EV charger rate update, do we need a motion for that too? Or, I'm sorry, motion to approve EV charger rate update.
So moved.
Second.
I'm looking at the wrong meeting. I was like, sorry.
Okay.
So diving into this real fast, we included in your packet the memo that was provided by the EAC at the beginning of the year, which was evaluating the cost of the energy and recommending an increase from 15 cents per kilowatt hour to 18 cents per kilowatt hour. However, that is just for the base cost of the electricity, and that is based on information in 2024. So we ran the data for Q1 2025. We took a look at the flow revenue and we took a look at all of the PICO bills that we got for the charging stations. And I will caveat this to say, we have the PICO bills for 5 of the 6 charging stations. The 6th charger, I believe, falls under something that might also include a light. And so it's not parsed out specifically just for the EV charger. So that is excluded from the calculations of the PICO bills, but that charging station is included in the revenue from flow. So we're doing a little bit of assumptions here. And based on our assumptions, we ran the numbers, and 18 cents per kilowatt hour is still not even going to cover our costs. Just based on Q1 alone, the average cost is now over 19 cents per kilowatt hour. And then what I did is I ran the numbers based on the total PICO cost for Q1. So I assumed that the PICO cost is going to be the same regardless of what we would have charged for the per kilowatt hour rate. So we had our gross revenue, which is based on the 15 cents per hour.
Per kilowatt hour, yeah.
Per kilowatt hour, minus the flow management fee, which is our net revenue, which we received as a distribution from flow. And if you take the total PICO cost, again, mind you, that this is actually, the true cost of PICO is actually going to be about $1,000 higher than what we have here because we're missing that one charging station. So you take the total PICO cost, it's $6,200, but assume it's $7,200. Based on our net revenue is $3,500, so we're in the hole $3,700 over Q1. So we are subsidizing people to charge their EV vehicles. So we are out taxpayer dollars, $3,700. So then I ran the numbers to assume a 25 cent per kilowatt hour cost, a 30 cent per kilowatt hour cost, and a 32 cent per hour kilowatt cost. And we don't break even on just the energy costs alone for the 25 cents per kilowatt. Because you also have to consider that we have time, labor, and materials that go into managing the EV station. So when they're out, Paul, he's out ticketing for the EV stations. Public Works is out maintaining them. And then if Public Works can't maintain them, then we have to call the servicer and have to wait for them to come out. And then there's annual charges as well. Yeah. So if we just assume a base rate of about, we said $400 per charging station per year, that's $2,400 of annual maintenance costs that we assume. we only break even, we only make a small amount of revenue towards that if we increase the cost to 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which again, assuming that extra charge for the sixth station, would give us then a net revenue of $358, which again will cover our energy costs, but doesn't do much in terms of our annual maintenance fees. If we go up to 32 cents a kilowatt hour, that gives us about $900 worth of net revenue for the year. Again, still only a third of what we're assuming for our annual maintenance costs. Obviously, this is then now doubling the amount of that we're charging for the kilowatt hours. So I would feel comfortable recommending a 32 cent per kilowatt hour charge because that will recoup our actual energy costs and give us a little bit of wiggle room for the maintenance costs. We are still under warranty for these charging stations, so our maintenance costs are relatively low now. They will increase though once our warranty expires. So we'll continue to look at what that costs, but this will ensure that we cover our admin costs nominally and our maintenance costs for the year if we increase it to 32 cents per kilowatt hour. So that is what we are recommending.
What, do we have any sense of like what the actual retail market rate is?
Yes, so it's anywhere from 30 to 36 cents per kilowatt hour in the Pennsylvania market.
And you have your charger, you pay?
I,
You have your own,
no, I use house current, so I just use, it's whatever the charge.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
18 cents.
So the average across the state of Pennsylvania is 34.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
All right.
And Jersey is 36.8 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, well, I was ready for 30 cents. I wasn't ready for 32. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not that different. But I did talk to Jean
Yeah.
Durock, who's the Public Health and Safety Chair, and
Yeah.
she also talked to Lee Davis, and she said they'd both be comfortable with a 30 cent, up to 30 cent, or they didn't say up to 30, they said with a 30 cent per kilowatt hour charge.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem partially subsidizing these things because it's consistent with,
Yeah.
our overall views of the world that, we're trying to encourage people
And
to go green. So I don't mind potentially losing a little bit of money, at 30 cents.
I think part of the original idea, I mean, none of us was there when when the chargers were set up, but part of the idea was to sort of subsidize and encourage use. Maybe we're past that point that people need to be encouraged with a bargain rate.
I will note, we did look at the ordinance that started this whole thing, and there is a clause in there that says that the rate shall be set so that all costs incurred by the borough are covered.
Oh, really? Okay.
With extra to account for the actual amortization of the installation costs. I mean, so we took a deep dive into
Okay.
how many tens of thousands of dollars we spent. Now, we did get some rebates and there was some
Yeah,
grant
sure.
money and stuff, right? But, I mean,
Yeah, going forward. Okay, that's important to know.
so
That's the ordinance says
the
that.
ordinance actually says that we do need to cover the full cost. And I also want to remind you that energy rates are going to go up in the summer, and we did sign our new IGS energy contract, so there is going to be energy rates ahead in the future. So if we go to 30 cents an hour now, like I said, that gives us maybe $300 of wiggle room. That is going to get eaten up super quickly with the rising energy costs. So we will very quickly, I'm assuming, based on my calculations, that we will very quickly then fall into the not even making enough to cover the energy cost, not to mention the time, the admin, and just so the machines, the public works time, our time, we have to pay flow, we receive, so we're talking bookkeeping time, admin time, there's processing that gets involved in this, managing the contract, pulling the data.
How often do you think we're gonna have to reevaluate this?
So now that this is kind of more on the radar, if this is something that we want to keep tracking, we can just have a side spreadsheet, and every time we get a PICO bill, every time we get a flow distribution, any sort of cost, we can kind of keep track of it on the side to figure out kind of what our true costs are, and just kind of keep a running tab on it. So we can keep up with that. That would be something as well that I know the EAC has expressed interest in doing utilization reports if they want to volunteer to help with this. We can talk with Lee about it, but I just think that if we're going to raise it, the cost difference to consumers, if we're going to raise it to 30, the cost difference to consumers for 32 cents is so nominal because most of these chargers people are paying 82 cents, $1.25 maybe. And so they're not going to really see a huge increase. Obviously, yes, it's doubling, but in terms of the dollar amounts, we're not talking huge dollar amounts.
It's so little.
So it's, because you plug in for an hour or two and you end up paying less than $1.
You're right.
Ah, okay.
So it's,
The sense of scale on that is helpful.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was gonna be like a $10 per charge difference.
no, the biggest,
Oh, wow,
the
okay.
biggest charge that we saw was somebody had plugged in for like 13 hours. They left their vehicle plugged in overnight and it ended up
I
being
think it was like $6.
$6.
Oh.
Yeah,
So-
between like 6 to
Okay.
9.
I think,
Yeah.
I think we're good with 32 cents.
32
knowing
cents is
that.
fine.
All right,
Yeah.
you like it? 32
So
cents is
30
okay?
So 32 cents, and then we'll continue to monitor it, so if things increase, then we might want to talk about going up to like a 35 cents, but that'll be based on data and we'll continue to track it.
Okay.
That sounds good.
We're comfortable recommending it, all in favor of recommending 32 cents? Okay, good. What else do we have time for here? Installation dedicated EV charger for borough use. Motion, so moved.
Second.
Okay.
So real fast, this is what we had talked about before. Long story short, we did not get the grant, so we're
Yeah.
gonna proceed with the installation. So we just got delivery of our new, I'm gonna forget the make and model of it, Dodge
Charger?
Blazer.
Blazer, thank
Blazer.
you.
It's a Chevy.
Chevy Blazer, I know nothing about vehicles,
That's okay.
sorry. Chevy Blazer, thank you.
In
Fair.
service today.
So that's out on the road. So now we have 2 police EV chargers. We have our parking enforcement vehicle as an EV. We're looking at getting more EVs for our fleet. So we want to have a dedicated charger. Jim, I wanted to clarify, it is a level 2 charger, not a level 3 charger.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But that, we have an old oil tank in the public works yard, that's gonna come out, that's part of the quote, and then we're gonna get the level 2 charger put in that will be dedicated for borough use, which will mean that we will have then increased public use of the chargers that we have behind the library currently.
Is there any kind of meter on that to show how much we're using?
Yeah, we're gonna have to get another Pico service contract, and that's gonna have its own dedicated
Okay.
account added. We have like 26 Pico accounts that we pay every single month, so
Okay.
it'll just be one other one, and then, that'll be dedicated and we can
Okay.
track it.
And how, do we have to approve this? or-
Yes.
We do. We approved it, and the amount was 4,000, what was it?
That was 5 something with the other part.
If we're going to approve it, do we need to say the amount?
You can say it's 7.
$4,575.
Yeah.
Yep, all in favor?
Yep.
Good. Wow, okay.
I think we're at time.
Yeah, we got it. Okay. Lot of discussion, a lot of action, not a lot of discussion.
We'll talk about the HRC policy, the changes next time.
Guess so.
You guys have the edits, there's a couple of things
Yeah.
in there that I raised as discussion items that maybe we can talk about before the
Yeah.
meeting, so if you
Okay.
those changes.
Shade trees gonna wait on Saldo, I assume there's no update on that. Zoning recodification, did we even get a written
It's in the
update?
packet.
It's in the,
So, yeah, we're good on that.
This was, Emily had sent it out earlier today, Todd sent, it's just a Word document.
okay, okay. Blah, 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 blah. Public comment, anybody online?
Jim, I just want to make sure, I want to hold that, the Sunshine Act we had talked about, the meeting with all the boards and commissions,
Yeah.
so we're going to have John Walco join us to
Oh,
give a
okay.
presentation about the Sunshine Act, so it's Office of Open Governance,
Okay,
for Right to Know Sunshine Act, to inform all of the boards. You and I had talked about this. last
yeah,
week.
absolutely. Oh, the one other thing I just want to announce is that we're gonna have an evaluation, 6-month evaluation for the manager like we did last year for
Oh,
Matt.
cool. Yeah,
And it's gonna be all the same stuff over again.
sounds good
Any public comment?
Online
for F&A.
for finance.
Finance administration? Anybody online?
Okay.
Nobody online. Let's have a motion to,
So moved.
so moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, we're adjourned.
Just under the deadline.